I feel incredibly lucky that we came on Netflix at the moment we arrived. It was, I think maybe they've been making original content for like 2 years. Maybe we were like the 34th show that they had made.
Right.
And so there was an unbelievable freedom there artistically. And for Big Mouth to be what it was, it really needed to be able to, go there. And that was sort of became an ethos in the room, especially after the show came out, was like, no, like Big Mouth goes for it. And like, we have to, or we're not doing our job.
Hello and welcome to My Hollywood Story. I'm Stacey Wilson Hunt. My guest today is comedian and actor Nick Kroll, who stars in and co-created Netflix's puberty-themed animated series Big Mouth, the 8th and final season of which premieres on May 23rd. I last spoke with Nick in 2019 for the 3rd season of Big Mouth, but hadn't really had a chance until now to dive into how he's managed to curate one of the most diverse comedy careers in Hollywood. And he has a lot to say. He reveals to me the joke that changed his life, his first impressions of college pal and frequent collaborator John Mulaney. He also admits that making ABC's ill-fated Cavemen sitcom was, quote, a total nightmare. And he describes what it feels like to say goodbye to Big Mouth's most memorable characters. My Hollywood Story is sponsored by Mattel Films and recorded at Neue House Hollywood. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, leave a review, and let us know what you think. Welcome, Nick. It's so nice to have you on My Hollywood Story. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm so honored to have you here. And actually, the first time we spoke in person was in 2019, right down the street at Titmouse, where you made Big Mouth. And back then, you were single with no children. And your life has changed precipitously since then. You are now married with 2 kids, if I'm not mistaken. How are you? Are you rested?
No, I'm not rested, and I'll probably start coughing something weird during
cool.
this interview because I'm in that stage of parenting with 2 young kids where I'm always sick. Like I've had this cough for I think like 3 weeks now.
Yes.
And it's something is like living inside of me that I'm trying to get out.
Is it speaking to you yet, or it's just living
No,
there?
it's just like it just comes literally physically out at inopportune moments. So, but other than that, very good. And luckily, not getting rest.
Good.
My kids sleep well.
I'm so happy for you. I'm just so happy for you that you found a wonderful person, and I'm sure you're a great dad.
I'm such a good dad. It's crazy. I know a lot of people say that, but I really, no. It's been amazing, and I have a amazing partner, my Lily Kwong, my wife, and it's amazing. It's just a wild thing to have children.
I'm sure.
I took my time.
Oh, not by LA standards, you're still a young dad.
Yeah.
Sometimes we see the dads, you're like, grandpa or dad? It's hard to tell.
Of course.
But what I love about LA and New York too, and a lot of places in the world, you can choose to do those things whenever you want, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I was trying to avoid the Pacino version of fatherhood, or
De Niro.
Yeah. I was trying to avoid being an icon who decided to have children late, but
you're just an icon.
Exactly, that's it. Just simply an icon. Alas, we must live with what we are.
It's your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of family, I want to talk about your origin story. Where your story begins is Rye, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like your childhood is now one of the most documented in the history of the world through Big Mouth and also your stand-up, but I still think there's more to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So what were you like as a child beyond what we have learned about you from your stand-up and from Big Mouth? What would surprise us to know about what you were like?
Whoa, that's interesting. Because, I mean, Big Mouth has so much of, it's really from adolescence on of kind of what I was going through in middle school and into the beginning of high school now. Mark Maron has said, I think publicly, that at some point he stopped following me on Instagram because he hated to see the pictures of me smiling as a child. Because it looked like I had a happy
He was
childhood.
Jealous?
Yeah, he was just annoyed that I was like also a comedian, but that I seemed to have had like a nice, happy childhood, and I think it's true. Let's see. I can tell you what my first joke was.
Oh, that's a great question, and please do.
I guess I was like 5, and I would ask. I'll do it. I guess I'll go. Have you ever smelled mothballs?
Yes.
How did you get the little sucker's legs open? So. Like, I don't know if when I was 5, whether I like actually understood what that joke was, But that was the joke I was telling as a 5-year-old.
And where did you hear this joke?
That's another great question. That's the thing about being the youngest of 4 is you're exposed to so much at a much younger age. Like I've told this story before, but my parents were away and we had these babysitters, and my brother got to choose the movie that we watched, and it was The Exorcist. So I watched The Exorcist when I was 5.
Oof.
And I still don't really like scary movies. But I was also watching like Hot Dog, the movie. I don't know if you remember that. It was like
I absolutely do.
It was in that genre of like ski, like it was in that Revenge of the Nerds era.
Yeah, like Better Off Dead vibe.
Yes, exactly. But like a little more Porky's than Better Off
More
Dead.
Porky's for sure.
But I probably watched that when I was 5. So like I was exposed because I had a brother who was 7 years older than me. I was exposed to so much so young that I think it did form my sense of humor, or allowed me to tell. And I was just telling someone about the mothballs joke, and I was like, yeah, that is a pretty fair version, a symbol of what I still kind of find funny, which is like slightly scatological, dirty, right, slightly confusing.
Right. You do have to think for a minute.
You have to think like what a mothball is like. He's referring to tiny moth testicles and somehow spreading the moth's legs open so you can see the testicles.
Right. So the mind actually is required to like logistically, how is that possible?
Right. And it also requires someone, it's by saying, have you ever smelled mothballs? Which people are often, now as an adult, I tell them, people are like, have I smelled mothballs? Like,
well, we think we have.
We think we have, and then you have to remember if you have. Now there's like little cedar balls you keep in.
Right.
How'd you get the little tree's legs open, I guess would be the new version.
Right, which is not nearly as funny.
No, moths are so much funnier than cedar.
They really are. They're the hilarious of the flying insects.
They are pretty funny for a flying insect.
And were you someone who did voices and impressions as a kid?
Yes, I think I was. Like, again, I made Big Mouth with my friend Andrew Goldberg, who I've known since we were 6 years old, first grade. And by middle school, we were doing all the voices. We were like, I was doing like Wayne's World with him, and then eventually like Austin Powers, mainly just Mike Myers projects. But I would think I was always doing accents and voices in a, like a lot of kids do.
Sure.
But I think I never quite stopped.
No, you didn't. And we are the luckier for it. And did you pursue acting as a kid, or did you fall into performing sort of organically in school?
I did. It was weird. Like, I definitely performed in school, but I took almost every opportunity I could to get in front of people. But I wouldn't say I was like pursuing a ton of acting. We did a couple of plays, and I did a play in 8th grade. We did Oklahoma, and I went to a Jewish day school, and I was Ali Hackham, the swarthy Persian peddler.
As I would assume.
As I would assume, to play the Persian at an all-Jewish school. And then I went and did a synagogue play the next year, and we did Oklahoma again.
You did not.
And I got cast as Ali Hackham again. Both times my song got cut. And then I did a play the following year at the same synagogue that we did Fiddler on the Roof. And I played the rabbi in a synagogue production of Fiddler on the Roof in the most Jewish piece of casting possible. It's a tiny role. You have like one line in it. And that's the thing, is like, it wasn't clear. It wasn't like, oh, well, he's of course, like at an all Jewish school, they still made me at an all Jewish like synagogue, they still made me the rabbi. I wasn't nearly one of the leads. But you enjoyed
that experience.
I enjoyed it, and I was always like, whether it was like a school assembly in high school, I didn't really do plays in high school very much. I ended up being captain of the soccer team, even though I was not a very good soccer player, mainly so I could do we would do morning meeting every week, and we'd do like announcements, and I would always take that opportunity to like.
So sports was a vehicle for you to just be in front of people more.
In front of the school. And I did one like temperance play where I played like a bad guy. Similar to anyway. So, but it wasn't like I was like, oh, well, of course I will be a performer, like like the way some kids, I'm sure people you've talked to are like, I knew from the youngest. I mean, I think deep down inside of my heart, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a comedian. I want to be in film and TV, but I don't like as much. I grew up around a lot of privilege, but it wasn't like that was a part of it. Like, it wasn't like, well, of course you go on to make film and television.
Right.
You know,
What did you think you'd be doing as a career?
Genuinely had no idea.
Okay.
Like I didn't have any, I didn't think about it. It was when I got to college that I started doing improv and stand-up, hosting lots of things that I was like, oh, this is a viable thing to do. And we started doing workshops with UCB. It was just opening in New York. And
This was at Georgetown.
this was at Georgetown. Mike Birbiglia and I were in the same, like, funniest act on campus my freshman year. He won. I bombed, but I kind of bombed funny. And he saw it, and he asked me to audition for the sketch show that he and some friends were doing. And I got cast in that. And I went and did a read through of all the sketches. And I walked out of that read through and was like, oh, this is it. Like, truly, it was like one of those weird moments in life where you're like, oh, this is it. This is what I should be doing.
You had like a guttural reaction.
Yeah, I just was like, this is what feels natural. This is what I've wanted to do. I will now do anything I need to do to make that happen. I think, again, I was like going back to, I was the youngest, and it wasn't like, things did come somewhat easily to me. When you're the youngest, there's just like, and I can say that because I have now 3 siblings. They all have 4 kids. And I've now seen a lot of like 4th kids or the youngest of a big family. And they just, because they've been around older kids and people, and they've gotten a lot more information, that things do kind of feel as though they're coming easier on some level.
Well, they're not so alone. Like, I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
I didn't have someone showing me the cool things.
Yeah.
I had to discover it and then bring it home to my sister.
Exactly.
Right.
And the oldest are like lead blockers. They're taking a bit of a beating as parents
not
figure
fun.
out how to do things.
Right. It's true.
And by the time the 4th comes around, or 3rd or whatever, parents are frankly too busy to take too much focus on the kids. So you have a little more freedom to move about. And I felt that way in general. And then when I found comedy, I was like, oh, well, now I will actually try and focus on this. Like, I'd never really focused on anything before.
That's interesting. This episode of My Hollywood Story is brought to you by the Starz Limited series 3 Women. Shailene Woodley, Betty Gilpin, DeWanda Wise, and Gabrielle Creevy star in an intimate, haunting portrayal of female desire that finds 3 women on a crash course to radically overturn their lives. 3 Women, for your Emmy consideration for Outstanding Limited Series, and streaming now on the Starz app. And obviously you met your friend John Mulaney in school, and he was a few years behind you. Mm-hmm. Where exactly did you meet him for the first time, and what were your first impressions of him?
I believe the first time I met John was I was a senior, and I was the director of the improv group. Mike and a bunch of our friends had graduated the year before and moved to New York, and I was the director of the group now. And we were holding auditions for the improv group, and John came in and auditioned with a friend of his, and I was like, Jesus, these guys are funny. And I was like, well, let's split them up and see how they do, individually paired with other people. And his friend came back up and was funny. And then John came up and was yet again, like, electrically funny.
And he's a freshman at this point?
He's a freshman.
Wow.
But like a fully formed comedy brain and performer. And it was a absolute clear no-brainer to cast him. And almost immediately I was like, oh, this is the funniest person I've ever met. And then by the end of that year, like, I was the senior. I was supposed to be like big man on campus for like an improv group at a school that did not value entertaining at all. But by the end of that year, I was like, I guess I'll pursue comedy. I mean, I'm not funny because I've now seen John Mulaney. So I guess I'll give it a try still anyway. But it was truly... But I cast him, and I also cast Jacqueline Novak, her special Get on Your Knees came out on Netflix, I think, last year.
Very funny.
Incredibly funny, smart performer. And we have this incredible group of people between from John and Jacqueline through some other folks, years around me that are incredibly funny and all working and regularly in comedy in Hollywood in a great way.
So it turns out you were funny after all.
It turns out.
So you moved to New York after graduation?
Yeah.
And did you have day jobs? Like, how did you support yourself?
Yeah, I moved to New York, not to date myself, but right before I graduated in 2001, and I was going to move to New York fall 2001, and 9/11
was
happened.
a tough year.
So, which they can't connect me to. They're going to try. The internet will genuinely try to connect my family to it, truth be told. So it took me a little while. I was planning on moving in right away. I started taking classes at UCB. My first job was actually a charitable organization called the Gift of New York, and that my brother-in-law Roger Bennett helped me get. The Gift of New York was a larger charity, but at that point was very focused on 9/11 families who had suffered losses in 9/11, specifically like organizing like gifts for kids who had family who had lost people in 9/11. So I did that for a while, and then I got a job working at an after-school program at a magnet school in the city called the School of the Future.
Whoa, sounds intense.
It was everyone was on monorails, and but it was like a very cool, progressive public school, and I worked in the after-school program. Eventually, I pitched them like, can I teach improv and stand up? So I worked there, and that allowed me some time during the day to like audition for commercials and write and do all the stuff that I was trying to do. And I think I was probably there for about a year or two, and then I started booking some like radio commercials.
Did you have an agent or someone helping you with these jobs?
I had yes, I was able to, my like one showbiz connection was my mom was friends with a woman that she did some nonprofit work with, Stephanie Gary, who is an actress, like, and she also did commercials, and so she met me at Grand Central at a cafe in Grand Central, and sat down with me, and she was like, I'll introduce you to my commercial agents, Atlas Talent. And I sat down with them, and they're like, we'll start sending you out for some commercials. So I started going out for commercials and then voiceover. And it took me a little while to book on-camera commercials, but I started booking like voiceover for like Molson and McDonald's, like little radio voiceover sort of sketch stuff. And that started to pay the bills. And then I started to be able to, and then I started booking commercials.
Okay. What was your first commercial?
Let's see. I believe it was a FedEx Orange Bowl commercial. It was like during the Orange Bowl for FedEx, and I play like a fan of like the Temple Owls, and I swooped. I swooped, and I like, you see me fly off like a bookshelf. And then I booked a Lipton cup of soup commercial, the 3 p.m. slump. They were trying to brand cup of soup as like what you drink when you get like tired at 3 p.m.
Like a cup of salt, essentially.
Yeah, it was basically like, if you're tired, drink like just a hot bowl of sodium. And I could not remember the lines, and I had like a semi panic attack.
Oh no.
And then I did this MTV campaign for like a weird kind of character for like their stuff, and I had a similar line. Let's call it impotence. Lost my line boner.
Was this anxiety?
I think it was.
Yeah.
It was literal performance anxiety.
Okay.
And I started seeing a therapist pretty soon after that, who told me a very useful advice that I've used ever since, which is just acknowledge your fear. And at every new stage and step of thing that I've done, when something was new, I was like, just acknowledge that you're a little scared right now, and that will hopefully help quell those nerves and let you focus on what you know you can do.
I've talked to Tony Hill a lot about this, and he struggled a lot too. And we've talked about how that fear also means that you care a lot about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Which I like that perspective.
Yeah, well, I've found that the more and more I've been in all of this, like the fear and the critic inside of you are the things that when you're trying to figure out how to do something can paralyze you a bit, but they can also make you strive to be better and prepare and figure out how to do this and go in and or watch something you've done or read something you've written and be like, no, this can be better. Like, but at some point you have to like figure out how to manage that critic to be like, okay, yes, but you don't need to make me feel like shit about this.
Right.
Like, things are okay, actually. So how can you hold on to that, like that critical voice that helps you get better while not letting it dominate you and make you feel terrible about yourself?
It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And did I read correctly that you did a bit on Late Night with Conan O'Brien?
I did. I mean, it's probably like I probably wrote that into my IMDb. Like my IMDb is
That's why I never know what to trust when I'm reading.
Right. Well, it's like I think like in college, my friend Owen Burke brought me to like when UCB had a sketch show. I'm like in the crowd. It's funny if you look at this like crowd shot from like a UCB sketch from like 1997. And it's like you see in that crowd, it's like me, Paul Scheer, Rob Hubel, Rob Corddry, and all of these people who, you know, were UCB people who were just starting out. But I think I like one of the plum gigs you could get when you were starting in New York, especially at UCB, was like Conan had guest performers who would like be in sketches.
Right.
And it was like this really coveted thing to be like, I got to be on Conan because you get a credit. You'd also make some money for that day. And I was in one thing and I was like a mummy, so I was fully wrapped up. The bit got cut, and then I finally got to be in one where I was I was like an executive or something in the booth, and the guy I was with like blew his line, and I think it got on, but it was like kind of ruined. It was not my fault, but it was kind of ruined. But yeah, those were sort of my earliest like versions, and I was like going on the IMDb to like make sure that I was like man in crowd, Conan O'Brien guest appearance, like desperate to have anything on IMDb.
Hey, it made me bring it up today, so
here we are.
It's all that matters. So I can't speak to you without addressing Cavemen, ABC's short-lived series in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so interesting about this show, not only that it was drawn from the Geico ad campaign, but you weren't in the campaign.
Mm-mm.
Did they just sort of start over with a whole new cast, or were there people from the ad campaign that they drew into it?
The main guy from the commercials had his own show, I think on like TBS at that moment. Okay. It was like a show about people who worked in like a supermarket. And he was the sort of main caveman. Okay. So he wasn't like he was already on a show, so he couldn't be a part of it. One of the other cavemen, Jeff Daniel Phillips, auditioned and was like the fourth caveman. He was like the crazy neighbor. Okay. Those were the two main cavemen. And then I think a couple of the other guys from the commercials did not get cast. They had a full casting. I was just talking to Ike Barinholtz about this because Ike and I both tested. It was down to like 3 of us.
Oh, he tested too?
Yes. And Jason Mantzoukas, I don't know if he tested, but it was like, we were joking, like Jason was the one guy who like didn't really need to wear makeup.
His hair certainly was ready to go.
His hair and beard already looked like a caveman. And it was like, I remember being in the test with Ike, and it was the first time I really hung out with him and was like, this guy's really funny and cool. And like, and I booked it. And it was an amazing opportunity to be on a network show, really. Huge, at a time when like, it was a really big deal to get a network sitcom. I'd come to LA, I'd been living in New York. I flew to LA, lived in LA during pilot season, still when there was a pilot season. Right. And it was maybe like the last audition I went on, and I booked it.
That's huge.
It was huge for me at the time, and then a living nightmare to do.
What was a nightmare about it?
It was like 4 hours of makeup every morning.
Which usually you're guaranteed an Oscar for something like that.
Yeah,
right?
It was like, no, there was no. It wasn't like, well, Eddie Murphy's in makeup all day, but he's gonna make like $100 million to be in the clumps, or. You know, exactly, or an Oscar nom or whatever it was. No, there was none of that. It was just, and I have crazy sensitive skin, and I think that show, all the makeup. I mean, it was literally 4 hours every morning, and then about 45 minutes to an hour to getting off at night. I just moved to LA to do the show, and we'd start the week at like 4 a.m. on a Monday to get into makeup to start shooting around 8:30 or 9, and then we would shoot very long single camera hours. So that by Friday we were pushing because of the makeup turnaround, and we would wrap around 4 or 5 a.m. What they would call a Fraturday, Saturday morning, Friday night, Saturday morning.
Wow.
So I'd get about 48 hours legally off, and then we'd be back. And we did 13 episodes. We maybe had 1 week hiatus, and it just was a great first job because if it had become any later in my career, I would have genuinely lost my mind because I didn't realize how incredibly physically and I know it's like you hear actors be like, oh, it was so hard doing but this was genuinely
it does like sound exhausting,
physically exhausting the time, and my skin really could not handle it. And but I learned so much doing it. I really learned. I'd never acted I'd only been in commercials at that point.
Right.
I'd never been on a TV show or in a movie.
So you hadn't had to learn lines and come to set every day, and that's
just
a rigorous
over and over,
job.
and also be like, do I have to listen to the writer or director? Like, is script supervisor who's gonna like, what's continuity? Like, I have to match my coffee. Again, I have to do that again in this take. I can improvise here, but I can't improvise. Like, I did the first table read for that show, and again, I'd come out of like my own comedy improv. I was like, I'm here because I'm like, I do improv, I'm funny, blah 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 blah, whatever it was, and I changed a bunch of my lines in the first table read.
And how was that received?
They very kindly were like, they weren't like, stop fucking changing the lines, but they were like, next time, don't change all the lines. That you're like, don't punch up all of your dialogue.
Right. Be selective in those moments.
Yeah, or do it on set once you've done a couple takes as written. And like, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful.
You just didn't know the politics of the room.
It truly was like, and you have to like, when you're on a set, there are politics involved. And I don't mean that cynically. I just mean there are dynamics in any room you're in. And so you have to learn. And that job really gave me a crash course in understanding how these things work.
And were you disappointed when they didn't move forward with the show, or were you kind of like,
I was thrilled.
You were thrilled.
I was, well, because it came out, we went in, we were prepared at the TCAs, also a thing that I guess are still around, but they don't have the same,
sort of.
They were really important. And
well, especially for broadcast shows.
Yes. Right. And the TCAs was the Television Critics Association, and they prepped us. They're like, all right, they're going to come at us with a lot of questions about whether Geico is involved. Is this just like a long ad for Geico?
I've been a member for many years, so I know what it's like to be prepping for panels like that.
Right. So it's like, so just be ready. And we're like, okay, got it. And then we go in and every question was like, why is your show so racist? And we were just like, and again, I didn't know. So I was just like, I'll just be funny.
Right.
And it's just like, no, not a time to be funny.
Yeah.
Just.
I always do feel bad for actors in those moments, especially when you aren't an EP and you haven't had anything to do with the creation of the show. Yeah. It can be really tough.
So it was, again, a great learning experience, but it was canceled after they aired 7. It was dead on arrival. I will say, and I've said this before many times, if you go back and watch the show, and I think it's like on YouTube maybe.
It is, yeah.
It's pretty funny.
It is funny.
It's like not a bad show.
No.
It like the actual comedy and storytelling is not bad. It frankly should not have been made into a show. What was so special about the commercials was it was this like these 30-second vignettes of like, oh, wouldn't it be funny to see that cavemen were actually quite like posh and erudite, like, and that's how it should have been left. But instead they're like, let's make a show of it.
Right. Well, it's funny. I was scrolling down to read the YouTube comments about the episode I was watching. It was one where they're at like an art opening or something like that. Sure. And somebody just asked, this show's funny, but why do they have to be cavemen?
Yeah. Truly. It should have just
and
been
I thought
like,
that is actually
like,
a good
guys.
point. What is cavemanish about anything to do with the show?
But that's the whole, I think that was the conceit.
That was the whole point.
But it was, it had some flaws, but I think it was ultimately pretty funny.
I agree.
But I was genuine. I physically don't think I could have continued doing the show. I honestly don't think my skin could have handled it.
Did you have a dermatologist helping you during this
time?
time?
Yeah. I mean, they switched they were latex masks, and they changed it to silicone for me. This is like my bullshit actor, privileged whatever boy. But it's like, if I put on clothes, I'm like, oh, someone watched this with regular detergent, not like baby free and clear 7th generation.
The clear stuff, yeah. Right.
Like, my skin will go crazy from that.
Yeah, understood, Nick. You're not high maintenance. It's okay. It's okay.
By the way, high maintenance, great show.
Very good show.
I'd like to say a very special thank you to Neuhaus for being the exclusive venue partner of My Hollywood Story. Neuhaus is a gorgeous private work and social space for creators, innovators, and thought leaders to connect in Los Angeles and New York. As a Neuhaus member myself, I can tell you firsthand how amazing it is to work inside such iconic, beautifully designed buildings, while also enjoying elevated hospitality and thought-provoking cultural experiences. To me, Neuhaus has completely redefined the ideal environment for creative potential and progress. To learn more and apply for membership, visit neuhaus.com.
So it's interesting, after that show, which, learning experience, not a bad experience, you became very busy. Children's Hospital, I Love You Man, one of my favorites. The League, of course. Get Him to the Greek, Dinner for Schmucks, a lot of great comedy projects. Were you actively auditioning, or were you sort of enough of a mainstay now where people are like, okay, we got to get Kroll for this?
I'm trying to remember the auditions for different things. Like, The League was Jeff and Jackie Schaefer
Right.
were just scouring the LA comedy scene.
That's a great cast.
And they cast a really great group, and they just met with us. Like I remember meeting with them. They were like, "Come and meet us for," and I was like, and I thought I was getting breakfast, and then they just had coffee, and I was like, "Am I not getting fucking breakfast out of this?"
Did you order breakfast anyway?
I know I was. Now I would have. Now I know to ask for things.
Always eat at home. This
Yeah.
is what I've learned. Always eat at home.
I know, but I love eating.
Especially when other people are paying.
Exactly. That was not, and then, but I remember like auditioning for Get Him to the Greek specifically, and I probably auditioned for I Love You Man,
Okay.
but it was starting to be in that situation where it was like, you know, there's a little fun little scene, and I really there was that run where they were still making studio comedies.
Right. And we'd see a lot of the same people popping up.
Yeah,
Like
it was-
Aziz, Thomas Lennon.
Yeah, and it was
right.
like, or if you look at that group in Get Him to the Greek, it's like me, Aziz, Ellie Kemper, Jake Johnson,
Right.
a bunch of funny people,
And Russell Brand.
and Russell Brand and Diddy, and some of our finest sex pests.
And Jonah Hill, who's very funny.
Yeah, it was a great, again, for me, I had a blast. I couldn't believe that I was in like a feature film, and especially like a studio comedy. This was, again, like when you could make like a really fun,
Yeah.
expensive studio comedy.
People would pay to see it in theaters.
Yeah.
Ah,
Those
the
were
good old days. The good old days.
Yeah, but it was but those things started to like, you know, happen where I was getting these like fun little things, and I was like, oh, I get to be in these things. It was very exciting.
But you also then still got to do your own stuff and still write. And I want to talk about Thank You, Very Cool. First, that was your first stand-up special, correct?
Yes.
Okay, on Comedy Central. And in rewatching this, it's very interesting. It's a strange format in the sense that it's an amalgam of characters. It's you on stage. It's like BTS. It's kind of like the
Yeah.
preamble, you coming to the theater. It's actually like super interesting and gutsy to have done this for your first special.
Yeah,
So
some
tell
might,
me about
some might say a mistake to have done it as your first special.
No, I thought it was very ambitious. And
Oh.
also it's Comedy Central, so kind of you could experiment.
Yeah, it was a great time at Comedy Central. Kent Alterman was running it,
Kent, great
and
guy.
was really a champion for. And if you look at his run, you know, Thank You, Very Cool preceded Kroll Show, but if you look at his run of the shows that were on in his tenure,
Schumer, Key and Peele.
Schumer, Key and Peele, My Show, Nathan For You, Review, Broad City, Another Period, a bunch of just really funny,
Really funny.
like artist-led, writer-driven, like go do what you want to do shows. And Thank You, Very Cool, like, because I was doing stand-up, but I was also doing all these characters, and so my pitch to them was like, let me see if I can do an amalgam of what I do, which is like I do stand-up, but I probably don't have like a special's worth of just stand-up because I spent a lot of time doing these characters. And is there a way to integrate this all in, which I endeavored to do?
Which I would say that you did. And what was the scariest part of that process for you in terms of filming it and making it look the way you wanted it to look?
Well, because it was this combination of like stuff that was pre-shot in LA or shot on the state. Really, it was a bunch of the stuff was shot in various places in LA to sort of match up with like this larger story that I was telling, which was like, I did this character Fabrice, who was the originally the craft services coordinator for That's So Raven, who I then made it for this show.
I
Bobby
did craft services. I felt very seen
Oh,
by
good.
that character, yes.
Swedish
Yeah.
Fish, and then Bobby Bottle Service was security, and Oh Hello guys were like, I think in the audience.
Right.
Um,
Well, they're in the like that weird bar by themselves, right?
Yeah, it was kind of like it was just a shoehorned in there. But I think what it did do, what was scary, frankly, about it was I shot it in New York, and it was scary to shoot it in my hometown. Shooting or performing in New York, I find weirdly a little stressful because that's where my friends and family are.
I get that.
For some reason, it becomes like somehow like, because I think it's like people who've known me my whole life, it feels more like people who are like,
Well, it's like LA is work friends,
Yeah.
and then New York is your close
yeah, and the
ties,
rest of the country
right?
is just like people who've come to see me because they want to see me.
Right.
But yeah, it served. I mean, it's a great capsule of what I was doing at that moment, and then it sort of served as a sort of a backdoor pilot for me to do a sketch show for Comedy Central.
Well, I was just going to say it really does read as a proof of concept for a Kroll
Yeah.
Show.
Yeah. So I went in and then my friend John Daly and I made this pilot for them called Rich Dicks, based on a short that we had done called Rich Dicks.
Right.
and shot by John Kreisel. And it was characters that we were doing. He's Wendy Shawn, his family and owned Glass, and I was Aspen Bruckenheimer, and it was just like rich dicks, guys that John and I both knew growing up with, and
that became a segment on Kroll Show.
Yes, it was like we shot it as a pilot for Comedy Central. It was sort of like Comedy Central was flirting with doing like the Adult Swim 15-minute shows, so we tried it. It was funny, but not quite enough, and because I'd done Thank You Very Cool, they were like, would you like to do a sketch show where Rich Dix is a part of it? And I said, yeah. And I, with all your other characters. And I said, yeah. So we shot a pilot for it still, but then it became this thing. It was like all of my sort of recurring characters in a slightly different format than other sketch shows, which were one-off characters, one-off sketches. This was like, I'm going to do these characters and have them come back and change and fall into different genres and stuff like that.
Right. My favorite, I don't even call it a bit or a segment, was the opener with the women running in the train and the cake.
Cake Train. Cake Train was...
Please tell me first of all, how you conceived of that, how you got Zach to be the person throwing the cakes in the faces of the women.
It's a real... Thank you for bringing it up. It was a Chelsea Peretti,
yes,
one of my oldest friends in comedy, one of my dearest friends. She was, I think, writing on the pilot, and we didn't shoot it till season 3.
I could tell. You had to wait until you had a little bit more money, right?
Yeah. So she pitched this thing called Cake Train, and her thing was just like, it's Cake Train, and you hear it's like someone is doing some task in their home, and then they just hear like Cake Train, and they just like go like she would always be like doing something and your Cake Train, and then she'd go like a dog hearing like a whistle, like something off. And so that was always the pitch, was like someone's in the shower and they're
but
like,
it's all women though.
It was originally all women, and I think it stayed all women.
No, it was all women for
except
sure.
I think maybe I was in one of them, but and I was like, they was like Cake Train, and then so it was, but it required a moving train.
Yes, this is why I'm asking about this, because it's so ridiculous.
So it was. We wanted to do it all 3 seasons, and by season 3, Inman Young, who produced our show, who's now like one of the A24's like main TV producers, was like, we're gonna make it work, man. Like he was always on our team, he was always on my side. He was like, we're gonna figure it out this season. We're gonna figure out Cake Train, because it required like 6 different people in different locations for the setup of like a woman in the shower, a woman working, a woman in her home. And then it required a moving train. And then we got Zach Galifianakis, who I knew, and I was like, and it was the perfect thing for Zach to do.
It's so him.
It's like, because he doesn't have to say a word.
No.
And Zach is a silent film star.
He is.
And it was like, so Zach, the pitch is you will wear a baker's outfit and you'll be on the back of a moving train hurling like supermarket sheet cakes. And he was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay.
He's like, yeah, why wouldn't I do this?
This makes sense.
Right.
And so then it's him hurling cakes and then just women just getting splattered with
And it's
cakes.
in slow motion.
It's all in slow motion, also not cheap to shoot. So we then figured out how to we had a day, we were out of zone in LA. It was like, it had to be like an hour and a half away, like almost on your way to like kind of Ojai and that sort of like Santa.
That's where it's safe to throw cakes.
Yeah,
it was
the only moving train that we could find. So we had to make a day of it and then we re-engineered a couple of sketches to also take place at the train.
How long did this take to shoot?
Zach throwing the cakes probably took, a couple hours.
Right.
But then but again, if you're buying the train for the day, you got to buy. So then you're like, okay, well, Brian Lacroix, the Canadian like pop star from Wheels Ontario, who's now developed his own music career like Justin Bieber, we'll shoot a music video with him on the train, which is a song that he's made called Enter to Win. And it was a chance it was a show ran by this guy, John Levinstein, a really funny guy who was with Mitch Hurwitz on Arrested Development. And in that style of like, let's dig like 14 layers deeper than anybody is asking for on this joke to make it as hopefully funny, but deeply complicated.
Right. More so than is needed.
Required, or frankly wanted. But for those who enjoy it, and that's what Kroll Show tended to be, which was like this really cannibalized, self-reflective, like snake eating its own tail, weirdly highly meta, kind of, House of Cards.
Yeah. And who was your favorite character?
Honestly, it was whatever I was doing on the day. If people like Kroll Show, I can almost guess like who they're gonna like. Like for the most part, if I meet a gay guy, they're gonna love publicity.
Right. That's assumed.
Or a publicist. What's interesting recently, I've just been getting a ton of people about the Euro guy.
Oh, okay.
It's like 1/2 hour, 2/2 hour. Usually breakfast would be something cool like a cigarette or a bar of chocolate. That weirdly TikTok has sort of like
Your stuff is great for TikTok. A lot of these characters, this is pre-TikTok obviously, but a lot of the stuff has traveled, and I can see it playing very well in this new world.
Thank you. It's been, but I really I genuinely love them all. And when I was in whatever one I was in, I was so happy. And then when I got to then jump to the next one, I was thrilled as well, because that is the fun of of sketch or multiple characters, is you never get bored. You're just coming in and out and revisiting them.
And I got a little wistful seeing Brody Stevens in the show, a comedian we lost a few years ago.
Yeah.
Such a great guy, one of my favorite performers, and just so nice.
So nice, so
What do you most
weird.
miss about him?
Oh, he was so funny, and so specifically him, so deeply from the Valley, 818.
818.
And he brought an honest, genuine, self-effacing intensity to everything he did, and was willing I think he was a tutor for Caesar, and
Oh, right,
and we were on a
exactly.
beach
Right.
and shooting this weird thing, and he was just down to go for it, everything. And what was interesting about him is he would present facts as jokes, but they were also just facts. You know what I mean? And it was unclear whether he was always what he was. He knew that they were funny, but was it clear why? It was never clear, but it was also like so genuine and so heartfelt and so kind and sweet and just really funny.
Yeah, agree. I have a little pin that a guy I know who makes like little.
Is it the Coca-Cola Brody?
It's not the Coca-Cola Brody. He makes like little just pins like tchotchkes.
Yeah.
And I have Brody on my bulletin board at home, and I just like looking at his little face.
I have a Coca-Cola in the Coca-Cola, but it says Brody on it. It says enjoy.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's why I actually try to think about him and just enjoy life.
Yeah.
On his behalf.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about taking Oh Hello to Broadway.
Sure.
This was a big swing. And I wanted to know, whom did you have to convince that this was a good idea?
Honestly, with Oh Hello, we never had to convince anyone. We
Really?
just
That's
knew
good.
it was funny, or to us, it was truly the thing. I think for both John and I, that we were like, I don't care if anybody else, like, this is making us both laugh more than anything. So we started it at this little club in New York called Rafifi, where we all started this little black box theater in the East Village, sort of the heart of the alt comedy scene in New York in the early 2000s. And we would host a weekly show, and we would interview our friends and just absolutely decimate them after their sets. And we tried to get into Aspen Comedy Festival doing some version of a sketch show with them, and we didn't get in. And they were like, it's too New York. And I was like, it's too New York for all the rich Jews who live in Aspen.
It's also, by the way, NBC had the same concerns about Seinfeld.
Yes.
It's to New York. Oh, okay.
Yes. So, and then we did it on Kroll Show, and we found, ironically, that, what I found interesting was, like, we did it on Kroll Show. It was like, well, this is for us. Who cares if anyone else likes it? But we found pretty soon afterwards that I'd have like 16-year-old girls from like Albuquerque being like, we love the Oh Hello guys.
Interesting.
The Too Much Tuna kind of weirdly gave it a housing that somehow allowed us to do it.
Right.
So when Kroll Show was finishing, I had done 3 seasons of it, and I was cooked.
I'm sure.
Because I was doing The League at the same time.
Right. I saw that overlap. That must have been exhausting.
I was doing kind of like, I would shoot The League, and then I would go write and then shoot Kroll Show. And in one of those years, I made a feature that I had started with Bobby Cannavale and Rose Byrne called Adult Beginners. Thank you. You've done your work. He was a guest on, it was a a featured player in Conan O'Brien, Late Night with Conan O'Brien. But
That's a great movie, by the way. I really enjoyed
Thank you.
Adult
It's a very sweet movie.
It
and
is.
Bobby and Rose are just so they were dating. They are not married at that point. They were dating, and they're just incredibly talented.
And you know what I love about them? They're both willing to do anything.
Well,
they're in a lot of experimental indies. Like, they're really consummate
Absolutely.
actors.
Well, that's what and again, it wasn't indie, and like Rose specifically, and Bobby too, but like Rose, like there was no dressing room for Rose. It was like, we're shooting in a house. Can you guys hang out in a room? And they were like, yeah. When do you need us? And I was like, this is Rose Byrne. She was like a movie star already, and Bobby was like a movie star too, and they were just down to do it. But anyway, cool. I did all that. I was exhausted. I shut it all down. And Mulaney had just, the show Mulaney had just failed. And I remember having a dinner with him, and I just was like, whatever you want to do, man.
Like a palate cleanser kind of.
Yeah, like let's do what do you want to do? Let's do something. And we were like, well, maybe we could do, because we'd always joked about, is there a play with Oh Hello? And we started screwing around at UCB with the loosest of an outline. The first version of it, I believe, was sort of like, they were on trial for the murder of someone with too much tuna. And so then it was them defending themselves. Self-defense, they were representing themselves.
So it'd be like the Seinfeld finale where different people would come in and out and they'd have to interact with them.
But it was just them on stage talking to an invisible judge and jury and prosecution, and their defense was that they were cool like Steely Dan. And literally that was like, we're like, let's try that.
Steely Dan is a running theme through Oh Hello.
Yes, but it was like, so we over then like 6 shows like that of improvising, like over by the second or third show it was like, maybe it's not their trial. And it just became like, oh, maybe they're trying to make a play. And we did like 6 of those, and we booked the Cherry Lane Theater in New York, and Alex Timbers, who's I knew socially and had pitched him this idea, was like, yeah, I'd love that. We did one live, we sent him a couple of the tapes of those like truly bizarre shows. We did one show at UCB where he gave us notes after the show, and then we went into like 3 days of tech at the Cherry Lane, and we still formed whatever it was over like 20, 25 shows at the Cherry Lane, but sold it out like immediately. So that was the thing, is like, we didn't know what it was, but we immediately, there was a hunger for the boys.
And so what's the capacity of that theater?
Like 250, 300 seats. So
it's kind of like what Cole has done with O'Mary. So being so crazy, but Cole knew that there was a hunger for this.
Yeah, and ironically, also at the Lyceum Theater eventually.
Right.
I'm so happy for Cole. That
show is amazing.
But the idea that there's another show at the Lyceum that has been so incredibly successful.
Is that a coincidence?
No, and I love Cole. I've worked with them a few times and think they're like the highest talent.
Agree.
But anyway, we ran Oh Hello there, and then we toured it a bit, and then we were able to convince some producers that we could do it on Broadway, and yeah, we did a really unbelievably fun 4-month run on Broadway. It was like the most fun, I think, kind of the most fun thing I knew at the time, I was like, this might be the most fun thing we could do.
Oh, that's so great. And how did that partnership with John on that project evolve your friendship, and how did you change throughout that process?
Well, we had worked together in college closely, and then he like lived with me and on my couch for a summer when he was still in college, and I had moved to New York, and then he moved to New York, and we were there, and we were doing Oh Hello every week. We were spending all this time together, and then I moved out to LA for Cavemen, and then the League, before the League, he was in New York and was doing stand-up, and then we both auditioned for Saturday Night Live, and he got the job writing on the show, and so we started to then have our own trajectories. Was
it hard to watch him get that job?
It was, yeah. I mean, like, Saturday Night Live is like at least for me, my dream. Sure. And it wasn't, I mean, I knew John deserved it. I was so happy for him. I was happy that it was like giving me access into that world.
Sure.
But I was like, it was and always has been my dream.
Sure.
So, and I think like, and the beauty of doing Oh Hello was like the healthiest version of competition, whereas like, man, John is fucking killing. Like, John is killing with that joke. My next joke is kind of soft. I need to rewrite this joke for tomorrow so that it's, I don't know if it's going to be as funny as what John's written and performing, but like, and John, I think watching me perform was like, man, Nick can really sell this character. I need to like step up my physicality or whatever it was that like, it was such a healthy.
Would you give each other notes?
We would either notes or suggestions or pitches. And it wasn't really notes, but it was like, I mean, we wrote the third act of that play on Broadway every night. Like, we didn't lock the script for that show until the last week of the show when we were going to shoot it for Netflix.
Wow.
It was a complete, constant, evolving work in progress. And our least fun version of that show was when it was locked.
Oh, interesting.
Like, not having the freedom, because the show could range from like an hour 35 or an hour 40 to like 2:10.
And you had special guests like Steve Martin pop up, and
Yeah,
that would change the whole tenor of
Yeah,
that
I mean, if you
performance.
have like Steve Martin or, you know, John Oliver, Tina Fey or whatever, you're like, I'm going to talk to these people for as long as as long as they'll tolerate.
We got to squeeze every drop
Yeah.
out of it. Well, congratulations. It is very funny.
Thank you.
I didn't get to see it live, but it is
I'm
quite
really glad
something.
we shot it and that it lives on.
It's very
It was
cool.
the most fun thing to do.
It looked as if. And of course, now we come to Big Mouth, also in 2017. And it's ending this year, which
Yeah.
must feel bittersweet. And the last time we spoke was about Big Mouth. And in touring the Titmouse offices down the street, you showed me this certificate that you'd gotten from Planned Parenthood about the show disseminating messages to kids about their bodies, about choice, and other basic things that people should know. And you said something interesting. You said it wasn't our goal to do an episode about Planned Parenthood, but everything to do with these topics is political, whether or not you're trying to be. What does the value mean to you now of having made this show at a time when people are finding themselves and looking to TV for comfort and trying to understand maybe changes that they're going through in their lives?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think like first and foremost, we wanted to just do a funny show. That was always the bottom line. All these funny things happen to us. There's so many funny stories around puberty. As we started making it, I think we realized that we were going to talk about issues that were somewhat sensitive or tricky, and we were trying to figure out how to do that. Like, I think I was talking to Mark and Jen and Andrew. An episode that they brought up as an example of that was in season 1. It's like the head push.
Yes.
There's a guy who is trying to get Leah to like give him a blowjob, and he's like gently pushing her head down. And it became this conversation in the room about consent.
Right.
And then it became, so we then turned it into a conversation on the show amongst these kids who are really kids who are trying to parse out what this means. And we realized in talking in the room how confusing and gray so much of this was, and that it might be an interesting thing for our kids to then talk about.
And also this concept of consent is still very new for
Yes,
us to
and
talk about
that was especially like 8 years ago was really new, and we spent a lot of time reading, you know, books by like Peggy Orenstein, who was writing about girls and sex, and we wrote an episode like Girls Are Horny Too, and we talked to a sex educator named Shafia Zaloom, who's has been an unbelievable resource. Karin Atterson, who's a pediatrician and writer who actually works with my sister Vanessa Kroll Bennett on a puberty podcast called Puberty, and they also have a book called This Is Awkward, completely separate. But in talking to all these people, we realized that these issues were complicated, and we wanted to make sure that we were going to get them right.
Of course.
But ultimately, they needed to be funny. And if I ever felt like we were starting to get preachy or lessony, we had to pull back. We had to find a new way in.
Like after school special, you didn't want it to feel like that.
It couldn't ever feel like we were wagging our finger or teaching a lesson. It needed to be funny, but also we needed to be mindful of how we were being funny and what we were going after, who the target was, and what could be what could be learned or not learned from the jokes that we were telling. And so I think we ultimately felt, especially once the show came out and we realized that like kids were watching it, like I really, like when we made it, we were like, let's make a show that will make us laugh. it's crazy to think now that we didn't think that like 13-year-olds were going to watch it and be like, that's what I'm
especially when they
with.
hear, have you heard about this dirty show on Netflix?
Yeah, it was like South Park when I was a kid. It was like,
Right.
oh my God, you can't believe the show. So, but like it just didn't, it didn't,
Right.
it somehow didn't cross our mind. And so, yes, I think we felt a responsibility to be responsible with the messaging, but never at the expense of being funny.
Well,
And so Planned
always the
Parenthood
case.
episode, which was like about like what it was like. I mean, people from Planned Parenthood came to ask to talk to us and then gave us a tour of a Planned Parenthood. And we were like, can we make this funny and entertaining? And we found a way to tell stories about what Planned Parenthood does. And obviously it goes well beyond abortion.
Of course.
It's about female reproductive systems and female reproductive health. And there were so many different funny things that we could point to, and that's what we endeavored to do.
It was a very important episode. And I'm wondering, with all the creative freedom that you clearly had in making this show, were there moments that Netflix said, we cannot do that joke? And what were those moments, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I feel, as we talk about a retrospective, I feel incredibly lucky that we came on Netflix at the moment we arrived. It was, I think, maybe they've been making original content for like 2 years. Maybe we were like the 34th show that they had made.
Right.
And so there was an unbelievable freedom there artistically. And for Big Mouth to be what it was, it really needed to be able to, go there. And that was sort of became an ethos in the room, especially after the show came out, was like, no, like Big Mouth goes for it. And like, we have to, or we're not doing our job in what we do. And we had, so Big Mouth, Netflix provided us with freedom to do whatever we wanted. I mean, there's a few things, like I think in season 1, there was a bit that was so gross that when we watched it in the color, we were like, maybe we don't need to see Rick, who was like this old hormone monster named Rick. We didn't need to see him pull a thermometer out of his, as he called it, his sick little dick. So it was a sick little dick, and he pulled a thermometer out of it, and some blood spurted out. So we couldn't air it, but I'll explain it here. But it was so, when Netflix was like, hey, maybe we don't need to show. And we were like, oh, yeah, we're also on board with that. So
That made us sick too.
Yes. So there were a few things like that. For the most part, there were a few little things where they like, a steam pass when it was like the girls in I Love My Body, the girls go to the Korean spa, and there's all these different kinds of bodies in the Korean spa and the girls' bodies. And it was like, we need to do a steam pass because we're exposing too much of the girls' bodies. And it was a real conversation in the room. Jen Flagga was like, but this is where you're seeing a girl's body is not sexual. You are going to sexualize this. That's your problem.
Right.
We are not sexualizing these girls' bodies. And it was a real conversation and debate. And it was like, you're right. Yes, you are right. However,
Right.
there has to be some line where we, have to find and there were a number of conversations, and that's the beauty of animation, is there's so many steps in making things, from the radio play to the animatic to the color, and they're all broken up over many months. So you have distance to look at it and be like, this is too dirty, or this is too soft, and how can we tweak it and make it something that's funny, entertaining, and also makes sense in the ethos of the show.
Well, I think all the decisions were spot on.
Thank you.
When I say goodbye to these characters, it makes me sad to do so, and I will miss Lola the most easily. Who will you?
Oh my God, thank you so much. It's so hard to say goodbye.
Oh, Lola, I get teary thinking about it. Who will you miss the most, Nick?
I will miss Lola a lot. I think she did. There was a version of Lola on Kroll Show in Publicity.
Yes,
They're
I
different.
could see the connective tissue.
They're different, but they were not dissimilar. And I loved her from the jump, and I love improvising as her. I find it very easy to do.
Yeah, that just really just very simple for you.
Yeah, like a little blonde linebacker, latchkey kid girl. Very easy for me to access. I've loved Lola, and And the audience season 1 was a little like, who's Lola? And then like she has become a bit of a fan favorite, and that makes me feel really happy. And her journey of like finding love and those things, because she really is this poor like abandoned child.
Yeah, you feel for her.
You feel for her, and like her relationship with Jay as the character, but also Jason Mantzoukas, who's like such a dear friend, and being able to do like totally weird hookup makeout scenes with me and my dear friend Jason Mantzoukas.
So you guys rehearsed together a lot.
We rehearsed. We did method. We would do motion cap, mocap of it all those scenes.
You can tell it felt very real.
Yeah, no, it was. So I love Lola. I love them all.
Did they feel like your children and you can't choose?
Having now children, it's like that relationship's much more complicated.
Right.
It's very easy to love the characters that I created and fully control. I do not control my children.
No, and that will only get more difficult.
Yeah, so I really do love them, and I really do. What's hardest about Big Mouth ending is having made a show with my best friend from when I was 6 years old, and then all of the people from the writing staff to the talent. So many of them encapsulate. I mean, from John Mulaney, who I've known since he was a freshman in college, to Jesse Klein and Mantzoukas and Jenny Slate and now Io and Maya and Fred and Jordan I got to know a little later, but still have known for quite some time. And so many of the writers, Joe Wengert and Gil Ozeri, I started doing UCB with in New York, and all the guest stars, all of these, Jesse Klein, who I've known since the beginning, like these people it's a real time capsule of my friends,
right,
of like almost 25 years in comedy.
It's like the Nick Kroll universe, really.
It is. Fuck Marvel. Let's go to the NKU.
And while we still have a few minutes left, I want to talk about some of the features that you've made recently that I really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. The first is Loving. And I love Jeff Nichols. Love his work so much. And you played real life ACLU attorney Bernie Cohen in the landmark 1967 Supreme Court case. And I found an interview with Jeff saying that you were one of his favorite casting choices of all time. And he cast you because of Kroll Show.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, you never know who your show is going to be seen by.
Truly.
But I wanted to know, this movie is inherently unfunny, a very unfunny topic. And I wanted to know, how apprehensive are you, or were you in this case, to tell a story that is so heavy, that has so much import historically? And did you at all feel like on set, whoa, was there a gravity to that situation for you?
I was chomping at the bit to do that. And like, honestly, I'm trying to get better at it, which is like, you do a job. I'm trying to get better at, you do a job so you can do that job, not so that it can lead to other things. But part of doing Kroll Show was to be like, hey, I hope people see what I can do. And so Jeff, watching a sketch show like Kroll Show and being like, I think he could do this. But once we talked about it, it made sense. Like, Bernie Cohen is their lawyer, and lawyers are inherently performance driven.
True.
And they're charismatic but tricky, and they present one thing out loud and then might have a different like sense of who they are underneath it. And I think that's what Bernie Cohen was doing. He was playing, this is in the 50s and 60s, playing to a camera, playing to a court, the Supreme Court eventually, of like who he was there, but then having a separate conversation with the Lovings about what he was trying to do. And so it made sense that Jeff would think of someone like me to do that.
Right, that guy couldn't be stiff.
Yes, he couldn't be stiff, and he also needed to be able to play two different levels, and it's sort of something that I do often, and when I get cast in things where it's like the douche on Parks and Rec, where it's like he's a shock jock, and then you get to know that he's actually like a Ivy Leaguer or whatever. It's a different thing. So I was thrilled. I was a massive fan of Jeff's and his movies. And I was waiting for someone to cast me because I wanted to do it. And then I was nervous to do it, to place. But it's so funny when you do a drama and you do the scene and they're like, okay, great, we got it, let's move on. And you're like, oh, you don't have to worry about it being funny. You're like, we didn't have to worry about any laughs? Oh, okay, great.
That must have felt nice.
That's cool. All right, let's moving on. Okay. But he was so cool, and he was so amazing at we'd rehearse, and normally in rehearsals, you get everybody's in the room. There's like you do a quick personal rehearsal, and then they bring the whole crew in to watch, and then everybody goes off, and And then you come back in and then you get hit with makeup and then it's like, and action. You're like, ugh.
Right.
And with Jeff, he created this space where it was like, we rehearsed just the people in the scene a number of times. And then everyone saw it once, and then they came back and lit, and then came back in, and like the set was just so conducive to as few exterior like obligations as possible. And it was getting rid of so much of the noise so that you can then just be in this scene and be totally present. And it was a great learning experience for me. And working with Ruth Nega and Joel Edgerton, like, you know, to watch them act was a great experience.
Very special movie.
Thank you.
If people haven't seen it. And of course, Don't Worry, Darling was a bit of a point of interest for people.
Yeah.
And you're the only person I've ever met who's been kissed by Harry Styles. So I have to ask you, what is it like to be kissed by Harry Styles?
It's as good as you want it to be.
He said you smelled like plums.
Yes.
And why?
You know, I think Harry, whether it's watermelon sugar or plums, he's got a fruit thing, clearly.
Apparently.
Yeah. Harry is like as much of a delight as you want him to be.
He seems as if.
He really is. Like, and I've seen him a few times since we've wrapped, and it's like picking up where he left off. It was like, he truly is like a delight and a really sweet, lovely guy. So it was, it was that whole experience of being in Venice was wild. Everything that was going on.
It looked wild from the outside.
From the outside, it was bananas. From the inside, it was pretty crazy.
Sure.
But it was, yeah, to like finish that movie and be like, oh, that was cool. And like Harry rolled up and kind of kissed me in front of the entire world. I was like, this is...
You've made it, Nick Kroll.
Yeah, I've done it. My nieces and nephews are finally interested in me.
I was going to say, they probably were very jealous.
Yeah.
So before we run out of time, I want to talk a little bit about your writing process, specifically on Little Big Boy, which I really loved, your stand-up special on Netflix. Generally speaking, when you are writing, what are the mechanics that you require? Where do you like to work? What do you like to be drinking, listening to? Do you have rituals? And how did those rituals evolve in doing this latest stand-up special? And also, whom do you most trust to give you notes?
Well, I'm not a great sit down and write, especially stand-up. I've never been great at being like, I'm going to sit down and write this joke. I found that my process across the board is verbal. All the shows and things that I've written, for the most part, I am almost never in front of the computer. It might just be my like fourth child, rich kid laziness, but I really write verbally. Even as early as I realized, like doing Rich Dicks with John Daly, we would go for hikes, talk it out, and then stop and take notes and here's the outline. Okay. And that's always been the process. And stand-up is kind of no different. I usually have an idea. I'll get on stage. I'll riff, improvise on stage, record it, listen back, find the stuff that works, and then keep it, and then keep honing it through that process. Eventually writing it down and then tweaking inside of things. First and foremost, it's just a conversation with the audience. So it's pretty clear, especially if you record the sets, like where the laughs are, where the holes are.
So those are the notes.
Those are the notes. But then my now wife, Lily, had saw the act many, many times. And every quarter I would be like, why isn't this working? She's like, oh, they don't understand. You're setting this up in a way that makes them not understand where you're going.
The payoff.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So that would be helpful. Jason Mantzoukas is one of the great comedy note givers in Hollywood.
I bet he gives fun notes.
He gives fun notes. He also gives tough notes that unravel everything you do. But
so you have to be careful in asking him
his opinion. But everybody in Hollywood over the last 15 years goes to Jason Mantzoukas at some point for notes on what they're making, because he's really adept at it. He plays a maniac, but he's an unbelievably thoughtful, funny, super smart, perceptive guy who really understands character and story and structure in a way. So I would always go to him and have him watch it every once in a while. A few other people. And yeah, always just like the audience, like just especially if you record record my sets and listen back and be like, they're still not laughing at that. It's time.
You can't argue with that footage.
You can't argue with it. It was always audio for me. I rarely shot it, so I could always listen to it doing other things.
That's great. It's kind of like prepping to play a character that has an accent. You have to like let it sink into your oral cavities, I guess.
You would think when it comes to the accents, I'm like, this I think what he sounds like. No, but it does have, like the accent. You find the nooks and crannies of it, and it evolves. Is usually the goal.
The rhythms and
and like, oh, it's funny. Like, oh, hello. It's funny when they mispronounce the first. They cut the first syllable short. Broadway, Duquesne. Then you're like, oh, can we keep finding those words to make the accent funny?
Super interesting. And in Little Big Boy, you mentioned that you had seen every Mel Brooks movie by the time you were 10.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to work with Mel Brooks on History of the World Part 2 that Hulu did. How did that feel for you to collaborate on a Mel Brooks project, and how much time were you able to spend with him?
I mean, again, Mel Brooks was my number one. I really formed my comedy probably more than anybody else. I watched all of his movies over and over, all of them. The Producers particularly was a personal favorite and still is. And so the idea that he chose me to do this was like an honor and a real mind fuck to be like, this guy is asking me to do this.
How did you find out that he wanted you for this?
He called he works with Kevin Salter, who's his like producing partner, and guy is his guy.
He's got a guy.
I spoke to them, spoke to Searchlight who produced it. And in a very sweet way, Mel and Kevin made sure that I knew that they had come to me to do this.
Wow.
And it was really one of the great honors because I loved History of the World Part 1. It was one of the movies that we owned as a family on VHS. It was a tremendous, just even before we even made it, just a tremendous honor to have been like, oh, my hero is choosing me to do something. What a deeply gratifying honor, and then really fun to make. We made it during COVID, and Mel is now 98. He was probably 95 when we were working on it, 96. So I was Zooming with him often.
Want to keep him safe, obviously.
He was pitching us jokes, always pitching, always funny, always with great business advice.
What was his advice?
He was just like, he gave me and Mulaney advice when we were trying to do Oh Hello, where he's like, don't show anybody tape, make them come to the show live. No one ever buys off the tape. And he was right. We showed it to a big Hollywood and Broadway producer. He never came. He wouldn't come up to Cherry Lane, and we showed him a tape of it that we had made, and he's like, it's not a Broadway show. And I was like, Mel was right. But it was awesome to work with him.
And what did Mel say was a favorite project of yours that he loved?
He really did love Oh Hello. And he was like, you guys got the rhythms. He's like, I love your rhythms. I was like, Mel, we stole them from you. And it was all the, the movies, but it was also a big, always major influence on Oh Hello was 2,000-Year-Old Man.
Right.
Him and Carl Reiner. But what we changed was we just got rid of the straight man. So there's like, whereas Carl is always like, and Mel is improvising, but it was like the rhythms of it. And also just the feeling of watching two friends get a huge kick out of each other.
Right.
That's what you're selling. And that's what we were endeavoring to do with Oh Hello. And really what I endeavor to do with all my stuff is like, you just want to watch people who get a kick out of each other, have fun together. And when you watch all of Mel's stuff, you're like Harvey Korman and Madeline Kahn and Gene Wilder and Cleavon Little, but all these amazing performers, and you can feel how much they...
Cloris Leachman, too.
Cloris Leachman, Zero Mostel, the list goes on, and you're just like, these people found each other so funny, and you can feel it.
And there's so much love.
Yeah.
I had the joy of meeting Carl Reiner once at his house, and I just walking around his living room, seeing photos of him with his kids and Mel, you just like, wow, a life lived of love and laughing. It's just, you just have an envy of these people.
Totally. Yeah. Absolutely.
So in wrapping up, I wanted to know what you have coming up that you're excited about. I saw that mating season is now on the roster.
Yes, the follow-up to Big Mouth, which will come out basically a year from when Big Mouth, the final season premieres, called Mating Season, by the same team from Big Mouth, me, Mark, Jen, Andrew, and a great group
It's
of
horny
writers.
animals this time instead of horny people.
Yeah, it's like mating season, so it's animals dating and fucking in the woods.
Okay.
Sort of a dating sitcom thing. That is now a year away, but we're deep into that process. And then I have this weird window where I have Big Mouth coming out on May 23rd, and then May 28th on FX, a show called Adults.
Yes. Very funny.
That I produced and directed some of, about 20-somethings in New York City. And it's sort of in that great tradition of Friends and Girls, Broad City, young 20-somethings in New York, but a fresh take on it, written by Ben Cronengold, and Rebecca Shaw created it. And in a stellar group of young, funny actors.
I saw the first episode. It's great.
Thank you.
Very funny.
I'm really, really excited. That's on FX, and then the next morning or that night we'll drop all 8 episodes on Hulu. So it'll be on FX for Hulu.
Very cool.
That comes out May 28th/29th. And then I've got a movie with Andrew Rannells coming out on June 3rd. I'm sorry. Movie with Andrew Rannells coming out on June 3rd called I Don't Understand You.
I saw it. It's also very funny.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I must tell you guys make an adorable couple.
I feel that way too. So it's me.
Wait, so who's cuter, Harry Styles or Andrew Rannells, if you had to choose?
Boy, I'd like to watch Andrew Rannells and Harry Styles kiss. Let me just sit in the corner and jerk off and watch them. How about that?
That's a Big Mouth fantasy
Yeah,
right
that's
there,
a
my
Big Mouth
friend.
fantasy.
No, but I won't say what the movie's about because it's a cross-genre film. We'll
Yes,
say.
I can say
a gay
it's like
couple
we play
looking to adopt.
Yeah, we
right?
play a gay couple who's been trying to adopt a child for many, many years. We go on like a anniversary trip to Italy, maybe to save the marriage. Like
Maybe,
it's been
we
a
don't
little
know.
rocky and tricky. And then we get a call that Amanda Seyfried is going to let us adopt her baby as a character, not the actual actress.
She
Amanda.
has her own children with Thomas
She's-
Sadowski.
yeah,
she's not giving away her kids.
She's not going to give away her kids, but she plays a character.
Yes.
And we end up at this like little Nona's house in Orvieto, and then insanity.
It takes a turn.
It takes a turn, and so it's sort of it's a really kind of, you think you're watching kind of a rom-com, and then it becomes like a thriller farce. And it's very fun, directed by David Craig and Brian Crano, a real-life couple, loosely based on both their journey with adoption and also a trip to Italy that went off the rails.
That went awry, clearly.
Yes.
And I saw that Joel Edgerton is a producer.
Yes, Joel's a producer, and his brother Nash, a really talented writer, director, and stunt guy, did all the stunts for it. And it's a delightful romp.
and go to the theater to see it.
Yes, it's in theaters exclusively.
Exclusively in theaters. And my final 2 questions for you are sort of a paired sense of questioning. What do you hope listeners take away from your Hollywood story, Nick? And what have you learned in sharing your story today?
What I hope listeners take away is that even the most privileged children can become successful adults. No, I would say that what I hope that people take away is make things with your friends. Make things with the people that you think are talented, and make things that seem interesting and exciting to you. And if you can do those things, the chances that you will find success will be higher. That's been sort of my ethos, as much as far as I've been able to now sort of begin to distill what I've done and how I've done it. And yes, I'd say that is what I hope people will take away.
I love that. And what have you learned about yourself in sharing your story today?
What have I learned about myself? That I seem to have zero problem talking about myself. No, I think that it's interesting to talk to someone about a retrospective of a career and a life lived. It's very weird to not be at the beginning, nowhere near the beginning, hopefully the middle. I pray not the end. To be like, wow, what a what a privilege it is to have been able to do all the things I've done, with all of the amazing talent that I've been able to do it with. And yeah, just truly like, wow. Again, if I look back at myself at 13, when I was like doing all these little sketches and skits with my friend Andrew, that, you know, all these years later, 30 years later, that I would be able to be like, holy shit, the stuff I couldn't even bring myself to imagine that I could do, that I've gotten to do all of those things. What an absolute privilege.
Well, you deserve it, Nick.
Thanks.
We're proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and being a guest on this show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. My Hollywood Story is a production of Hippolyta Films and Entertainment. It is produced by me, Stacey Wilson Hunt, along with Sonia Slutsky and Wendy Green. Series producers also include Daryl Young and Janet Grayson. Our sound mixer is Luke Tierney, with camera by Ramiro Cantu. My Hollywood Story is edited by Nathaniel Wixon, with original music by Madi Gabriel and Jenny Carr of Moon and Star. Our logo design is by Brad Mitchell, and I'd like to give a special thanks to Champion Turf. My Hollywood Story is sponsored by Mattel Films and recorded at Neue House Hollywood. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, leave a review, and let us know what you think.